Yeah, okay. We are going, no, not yet. Okay, it's the video. Start with a video before to introduce our guest lecturer, Professor Damodaran. Okay, Marce.
El paso por la escuela de negocios fue un catapultador de lo que vino después. Me trajo muchas oportunidades.
Hay que saber integrar las distintas disciplinas en la vida y yo creo que esa herramienta esta universidad las da con creces.
Crear soluciones innovadoras y creativas para los problemas del mundo de los negocios.
Fue mi padre el que me dijo, tú vas a ir a la mejor escuela de negocios, se llama Escuela de Negocios del Paraíso.
Don Adolfo fue un absoluto precursor al ver de que las empresas y en las actividades de negocio se iba a necesitar de un respaldo, ¿no?, académico como el que hoy día estamos dando en la universidad.
La Escuela de Negocios forma parte de la identidad de esta universidad y en ese sentido ha sido testigo privilegiado de los 70 años de desarrollo de este país. Muchos de los líderes que han tenido posiciones de privilegio, muchas de las industrias que se han desarrollado, ha sido fruto de nuestros egresados. El mundo está cambiando aceleradamente, pero estoy seguro que los profesores que forman parte de la Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez y particularmente de la Escuela de Negocios están en la vanguardia para saber cómo enfrentar ese futuro desafiante. La Escuela de Negocios ha sido líder en estos 70 años y lo seguirá siendo, espero, por más de 70 años.
Nosotros creemos firmemente que los negocios son una fuerza para el bien, que tienen una capacidad única de resolver problemas, de generar prosperidad, de mejorar la vida de las personas. Y eso implica poner en valor los negocios, pero al mismo tiempo de ponerlo en valor, siempre estamos empujando al mundo de los negocios a mejorar sus estándares, a mejorar sus prácticas, para ir actualizándose así constantemente y abordar de mejor manera los desafíos de un mundo cambiante.
Lo que más caracteriza a nuestros profesores es que somos capaces de combinar lo teórico con lo práctico. La segunda característica que es esencial es la vocación por enseñar.
Ellos son los que le dan vida, cuerpo, historia, futuro a la escuela y a la universidad.
Nosotros en el futuro imaginamos una escuela que a través de la formación y la investigación tiene una contribución porque ayuda a que los líderes de negocios del futuro sean capaces de comprender ese entorno cambiante y desplegar su potencial y su talento en los negocios para que esos negocios nos ayuden a resolver esos problemas cada vez más complejos.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to welcome you to the conference Beat Your Bot, developed by Professor Damodaran. This year, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Master of Financial Management at the Business School of Adolfo Ibáñez University. For 2 decades, this program has been shaping leaders in finance, professionals who think critically, lead strategically, and act with purpose in an evolving financial landscape. Professor Aswath Damodaran is a distinguished professor at NYU Stern School of Business, a prolific author, and one of the world's most influential voices in corporate finance and valuation. Professor Damodaran has changed the way we understand value through narratives. His ability to bring together rigorous data analysis, academic depth, and practical insights has made him a global reference and an inspiration to generations of finance professionals around the world. On behalf of Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez, our business school, and the entire Master in Financial Management team, we want to extend our deepest gratitude to Professor Damodaran for being here with us today. So please, a big applause for him. Now I'm going to switch to Spanish to explain some major instructions. Esta presentación va a ser una presentación primero por el profesor Damodaran, después nuestro decano, Juan Carlos Llobet, que está aquí adelante, va a iniciar una ronda de una conversación en donde ustedes tienen que empezar ya a pensar sus preguntas. Les pido si lo pueden hacer en inglés y si no, Juan Carlos puede traducir para tratar de dar esa idea para ustedes. ¿Okay? Sin embargo, antes de comenzar, quiero invitar a Sergio Tricio, exalumno del máster en Dirección Financiera y CEO de Patrimore, que es uno de los organizadores, para que dé unas pequeñas palabras de bienvenida a la audiencia, que es su audiencia.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Gracias por darme el espacio para poder hacer una pequeña introducción de lo que es este evento. Nosotros estuvimos ya toda la mañana con el profesor Damodaran hablando de números y narrativas. Y quiero solamente comentarle un par de cosas, ya que no quiero quitarle tiempo a lo que es más importante, que es la presentación del profesor. Pero, sin duda, en Patrimore estamos muy contentos y por una situación muy particular, ya que precisamente Patrimore tiene que contar una historia relacionada a la Escuela de Negocios de la Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez y también al Magíster en Dirección Financiera. Así que tiene un aspecto simbólico muy importante para nosotros. Para los que no me conocen, mi nombre es Sergio Tricio, fundador y gerente general de Patrimore, y al igual que muchos de ustedes, cursé el Magíster en Dirección Financiera por el año 2013. En ese contexto conocí a Juan López, que también fue alumno del Magíster, un compañero informático, de pocas palabras, como buen programador, y fue en una breve conversación en uno de los salones de la sede de Presidente Razzuri que precisamente surge la idea que cambiaría, por supuesto, nuestras vidas, que es formar esta empresa de planificación y asesoría financiera accesible, de bajo costo y basada en un concepto poco explorado en ese entonces, que es la arquitectura abierta que seguimos defendiendo. Así nació Patrimore hace poco más de 10 años y cuando surgió la posibilidad de traer a Aswath Damodaran, no lo dudamos. Este evento es la realización de un sueño. La colaboración con la Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez fue sin duda clave para hacerlo posible gracias a su patrocinio y por lo tanto estamos profundamente agradecidos de ese apoyo y que también por supuesto tengan el espacio que van a vivir ahora en la tarde. Así que sin más preámbulo, muchas gracias por estar acá, muchas gracias también a la universidad por sumarse a este esfuerzo que hicimos en Patrimore junto a otros sponsors y les deseo que aprendan mucho, hagan muchas preguntas y aprovechen esta tarde. Muchas gracias.
So, well, let's start. Thank you very much, Professor Damodaran, for accepting our invitation to this audience, a university audience, an academic audience. The audience now is yours.
Thank you. First, I heard a lot of distinguished words describing me, but I don't take myself too seriously. I'm not a researcher, I'm not a deep thinker, I'm a dabbler. I dabble in things that interest me, I move on. I've probably some version of ADHD. So one week I'm interested in Bitcoin, the next week in sports franchises. I know very little about lots of things. And I'm going to argue that I'm probably approaching a stage in the world where that might be a strength rather than a weakness. But just to give you some background, I've been teaching valuation now for close to 4 decades. This is my 38th year teaching valuation. And when I taught valuation at NYU for the first time, it was the first full semester class in valuation. The material I put together for that class became my book. Almost everything I write and do is an extension of my teaching. So I'm going to set the stage here. But I teach only in the spring. I teach only 14 weeks a year. I take the remaining 38 weeks off. It's a tough life. And because my life is so tough, I take every 7th year off. It's called a sabbatical. It's very biblical, right? I worked so little for 6 years, you get the 7th year off. I'm approaching a sabbatical next year. I'm taking one. And usually people have big plans for their sabbatical. You know what my plans are? My daughter's going to have a baby on May 10th, and I've offered myself as primary caregiver for the next year. Now, because in 2020, with one of my grandkids, I spent the entire year with, it's the best thing I ever did in my life. I'm really looking forward to a very productive sabbatical. But this was last spring. I teach only in the spring, and I teach 2 valuation classes, one to the MBAs and one to the undergraduates. How many of you are students? Any students in this group? Just a couple? Right? What are the rest of you? Faculty? Okay. Just onlookers, people who wandered off the street. No. So now I teach only in the spring, and I teach 2 classes, one to the MBAs and one to the undergraduates on valuation, and a corporate finance class to the MBAs. I actually think the corporate finance class, people ask me, if I could take just one of your class, which one would be? I'd be the corporate finance class, because to me that is at the foundation of all of finance. Corporate finance is about how to manage a business. You can't value companies unless you know how to run a business. So I was in the middle of my semester, it was the 7th or 8th week, I get a call from a friend of mine. His name is Vasundar. He teaches this class called Machine Learning at NYU. He got his PhD in 1984 at Carnegie Mellon. Guess what the subject of his PhD was? Artificial intelligence. So those people who think AI was born on November 30th of 2022, which is the day ChatGPT showed up, AI has been around for a long, long time. So he called me and he says, Aswath, we built a Damodaran bot. I said, a what? He said, a Damodaran bot. I said, what's a Damodaran bot? He said, we built an AI entity that has read every single thing you've ever written. Every blog post, I've written thousands of pages on my blog. Every book I've ever written, it's been fed into the AI. It's watched every video on YouTube. I have 1,350 different YouTube videos stretching thousands of hours. It's watched every. It's looked at every valuation you've done, every Excel spreadsheet. And it remembers everything. That's a scary thought. I don't remember what I wrote in my blog 4 years ago. AI will remember. And I said, and so? He said, it's ready. I said, ready to do what? He said, ready to value a company. Can you give me 20 of your students, and they can value the company? Because every person in my class has to value a company. We're going to make the Damodaran bot value the same company and see how it does. That was April of 2024. The results are starting to come in, but I'm terrified of either outcome. What do I mean by that? Let's say the bot is better than every one of my 20 students. What's the message I'm getting? The bot can do it. You're not needed anymore. What if the bot does a terrible job? The entire reason I put all my stuff online is to teach people, and a bot that has read every single thing I've ever put out can't value a company. Hey, might as well hang up my hat and say, this is it. It wasn't worth the effort. The results have been somewhere in the middle. I'll talk about what the bot has found, but basically that's... So it set me thinking about what exactly is AI going to deliver? And this is more, I do a session entirely on the AI threat to businesses, but this is the question of what can AI do to us as human beings? What can it do better than we do? What will it do worse? And this was really a search on my part of, there's a bot looking over my shoulder, what can I do that my bot can't do? So let's set the process rolling, right? If you think about what AI is, this is a fancy buzzword, it's a culmination of two trends that have been happening over much of the last few decades. The first is computers have become more and more powerful and more compact. Take a look at your smartphone. My smartphone now has 20 times the power of the PC I used to use in the mid-'80s, and it fits in my hand. So computing power has become more, it's cheaper, more accessible, and more compact. And the other is the amount of data that it has to work with has also exploded on two fronts. There's, of course, the numerical data collected on computers. The internet brings all of the data into one space. The other is that we've all been a little too free about sharing data about our own personal stuff with Facebook and Google and Apple, and that data is also accumulated. You bring those two together, you essentially have modern AI. So this is not something that was born on November 30th, 2022. It's been building for a while. Of course, we've now attached a buzzword to it. So what I'd like to do is look at two things. One is, what can AI do better than human beings can? And then ask the question, what can we as human beings do to keep AI behind us? I can't tell you what you should do, but I'll talk about what I think I can create as my differential advantage. So let's look at first the things that AI is going to have an advantage on. If you think about tasks, tasks can be purely mechanical, or they can be intuitive and adaptive. If you have a purely mechanical job, you do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, a machine will always be better at doing mechanical stuff than you and I ever will. Why? Because we get tired. We could take a cup of coffee, we let our mind wander. Machines don't. Purely mechanical jobs, a machine is going to beat you every single time. As I do this session, I want you to look inward at what you do on a daily basis. It's actually a great exercise in how much of what I do every day is mechanical, same stuff. If 90, 95, 97, 98% of what you do is mechanical, AI is coming for you. Right? Let's take an entire profession built on doing mechanical stuff. I don't think much of accountants in general, so if you're an accountant, don't take it personally, I just don't think much of them. And fair value accounting in particular, I think is a really bad idea. Because accountants were not meant to do valuation. They want precision. Fair value accounting has essentially become hundreds and hundreds of rules that you have to follow, check boxes. It's completely mechanical. I don't think we need Ernst & Young and Deloitte to do fair value accounting. A machine can do it. So if what you do is completely mechanical, I wouldn't even look over my shoulder. I'd look for something else to do. A machine's going to do it better. Second, and this goes to the previous point of, if you have a job that's rules-based, AI is going to be better positioned to follow all the rules than any human being can. The first successful AI adaptations in finance will be in areas like fair value accounting. Okay? I know there are bots already working out there that will take the accounting rules, put them into a machine. There are hundreds and hundreds of rules. Machines are capable of following every single rule. Third, in my classes, I get a mix of students. I get liberal arts majors, history majors, literature majors. I also get engineering, recovering engineers, recovering mathematicians, recovering scientists, all in my valuation class. And they use the word subjective like a weapon. So when I value a company and I said, this is what I think will happen in the future, engineer will put up and say, that's subjective. I said, of course it's subjective. It's a future. I've got to make a judgment. And be glad it's subjective. They want an equation. Can you give me an equation that will tell me what the growth rate is? And say, be glad there isn't an equation, because if there is an equation, why would I need you? Subjective means you're making judgments about the future. You're going to be wrong. Today is a particularly tough day to be an investor, right? Everything is harder to do than it was yesterday. Things you took for granted are all of a sudden saying, be glad, because AI wouldn't have a good chance of dealing with this because it's looking at past data. When was the last time this happened? Oh, it never has. Maybe 1930. I don't know what to do. Be glad that it's hard to do. I know it's not the feeling you have now, because these are the kinds of places where machines are not going to be as good as you are. And finally, when I teach my valuation class, I spend the first session talking about what I call the Bermuda Triangle of valuation. You know what the Bermuda Triangle is? This mythical area in the Atlantic where ships and planes supposedly go to disappear. The Bermuda Triangle of valuation is where good sense disappears. Here are the three sides of the triangle. The first is bias. What does that mean? In most valuations, people decide how much to pay, then they look for a justification for that number. Most valuation, the value gets set first, the valuation follows. I tell people, you tell me who paid you to do a valuation and how much they paid you, I'll tell you which direction the bias is and how much the bias is. The second is uncertainty, because in the face of uncertainty, what do human beings do? They freeze. Today, I'll wager lots of portfolio managers who came in this morning and said, I'm going away for 3 weeks, I don't know what to do. Uncertainty. The third is complexity. I did my first valuation. I was talking about this morning. When I did my first valuation, there were 8 line items in my valuation because I did by hand with a pencil and a calculator. Today, you open up a banking valuation spreadsheet, there are 500 line items and 16 worksheets. We're drowning in complexity. But if your valuations are biased, what does that mean? I know what your destination is already, right? And if I know what the destination is, you've set yourself up for AI, because AI says, look, I know you want to come up with a really low number for this company because you don't want to pay the tax guy too much. I'll find a way to deliver a really low number for you without making any of the screw-ups you might make in actually having to make the choices. If your valuations are already predestined, again, you're set up for being replaced by a machine. So I want you to look inward, and some of your jobs you can already look at. You do the pie chart of what you do, 95, 97, 98% of what you do is mechanical, rule-based, driven by bias. Why would I need to pay you when I can get an AI machine to do that for nothing? So now let's talk about what we can do. Because this bot, even though you might not have a bot with your name out there, act like there's a bot looking over your shoulder right now, because implicitly each and every one of you has a bot with your name looking over your shoulder. And it's saying, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, and I can do that better than this guy can. Right? So let's look at the things that are, and this is a personal perspective and what I think I can bring in. Maybe I'm completely delusional that a machine cannot. So as I look at responding to AI, what can you do? And your answers might be different from mine, but I want you to start thinking about that now in terms of what you can do. First, we've spent decades now putting specialists ahead of generalists. Why? There's so much knowledge to accumulate in each discipline that nobody can be a doctor anymore. You're a toe doctor or a knee doctor, and a specialization as... Because 100 years ago, you had general practitioners. Why? There wasn't that much in medicine to splinter and dice up. You might have surgeons and doctors, but that was it. We've created a world of specialists, and that's a good thing, right? Because that knee doctor knows a lot more about knees than any general practitioner can. But there's a consequence of that. Have any of you gone to a doctor and the doctor is a knee doctor, they look at your knee and they seem to forget that the knee is attached to the rest of your body? They devise solutions. This will fix your knee. It might kill your liver, but that's not my problem. Right? It is a problem with specialization. You have tunnel vision, all you can think about. And the same thing happens in areas like finance. Somebody says, I know everything there is to know about mortgage-backed securities. The fact that you're screwing up big time is completely lost because you have tunnel vision. And we've kind of pushed generalists to the background. I think it's time we thought about how much better it might be to have at least a few generalists in this process. There's actually a book on forecasting, on who's better at forecasting. And I think the animals he uses are hedgehogs versus, was it fox? It's foxes, hedgehogs versus foxes. And he uses it to contrast the forecasting abilities of specialists. So today, who's on CNBC? Macroeconomists. Forecasting what? Macroeconomic trend lines. You know who's terrible at forecasting macroeconomic trend lines? Macroeconomists. Strange thing to say, they have so much tunnel vision that they can't. The best forecasters, according to Phil Tetlock, who's the author of this book, is people who have general knowledge, a little bit of each, turn out to be better forecasters than specialists do. Yeah. A few years ago, I was with my family in Florence. And I was in front of a building that I'm sure if any of you have been to Florence, you've seen this, right? It's a Duomo, the most famous, the second largest freestanding dome in the world when it was built. Does anybody know what the largest freestanding dome was? It precedes the Pantheon in Rome. But barbarians, I guess, attacked and they lost all the plans for it. So by the time you get to the time that this dome was going to be built, nobody knew how to build a freestanding dome. So we were in Florence, we were going to go into the dome, and my family decides to take a gelato break, which in Italy is a big deal, right? Summer, let's take a gelato break. I wasn't in the mood for gelato, so I sat there outside looking at the dome, reading the little brochure about how the dome was constructed. And you know who the architect of the dome was? What his name was? A guy called Brunelleschi. So I said, this guy must have been an architect. He was an artist. He actually carved one of the doors. He knew nothing about architecture, nothing about construction. But he taught himself enough of each of those things to build the largest freestanding dome in the world. The Renaissance man, right? If you find that sexist, Renaissance person. Leonardo da Vinci, right? There's a great book on da Vinci saying, hey, what was he? Is he an artist? Was he a scientist? The essence of the Renaissance man is they did a lot of different things, and that general knowledge allowed them to be better at whatever specific thing they picked. When I first came into finance, there were a lot more Renaissance people around. You could talk to a banker who could talk about culture, who could talk about drama, who could talk about history. Today, you walk into a bank, you talk to a banker, they know everything there is to know about some small slice of markets. Zero sense of the rest of the world. And this starts very early, right? 7th grade, 8th grade, you're already encouraged. You're good at math, focus on math, that'll get you into a better college, become a better math person. Maybe we need to rethink how we think about education and how our own kids get educated to kind of broaden that education. The whole idea of an education broadening your knowledge has been kind of warped and made it specialized. So if you're a specialist, think about generalizing. Don't have lunch with the people who work in your department. Have lunch with people who work somewhere else because you want to get that different perspective. Second, and I'd spent this morning session was on this. I'm in valuation. When people think about valuation, they think about Excel spreadsheets. They're Excel ninjas. That's what bankers turn out, Excel ninjas. You know which buttons to hit. And for 30 or 40 years, valuation classes in much of the world have become modeling classes. You take the numbers, you feed them into Excel spreadsheets, you teach them. And that's a skill that was useful, right? Bankers hired spreadsheet ninjas because you had to convert numbers into spreadsheets. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands of bankers today who should be looking over their shoulder. If what you do is build big spreadsheets, ChatGPT can do it for you. It's a completely mechanical exercise. Valuation, if it's all it is an Excel spreadsheet that you extrapolate the past, I really don't need human intervention. And this precedes AI. About 10 years ago, a friend of mine, Anand Sundaram, who teaches at Dartmouth, and I created an app. If any of you have an Apple device, you can still find the app on the App Store, called UValue. Lowercase u value is one word. It's an app that will do an intrinsic valuation of a company. So let's say you're at an airport, your flight is delayed. Instead of doing what normal people do, which is, I guess, go get drunk, you sit there and decide to value a company. Why you would do this, I don't know. You have the app in your hand, it asks for 12 inputs. It'll turn out a pretty good intrinsic valuation. Check out the price of the app while you're on the App Store. You know what? It was free. It's still free. Why? Because the message we wanted to send to people was, if you're taking your numbers to an appraiser or a banker and all they're doing is the mechanical stuff, feeding into spreadsheets, I can do that for you. And this precedes AI. And if you think about the power that AI brings in to be able to look up the data and create the spreadsheets, if all you do is modeling, your days are numbered. So this morning I spent the entire session, and I won't go into in depth, but if you're interested, you can get the slides to that, about this process of connecting stories numbers. I believe a good valuation, no matter what the spreadsheet does, there is a story embedded in there. A good valuation is a bridge between stories and numbers, that every number in your valuation has to have a story attached to it, and every story you tell me about a company has to have a number attached to it. It does two things. One is it gives, I don't know whether this will even sound, it gives your valuation a soul. There's something there besides just a collection of numbers. Second, it makes it much more difficult for AI to do what you do, right? Because the storytelling requires that you make some leaps of faith and interesting connections that a machine will have a tougher time doing. So if you're in the business of something like valuation, we're working with a lot of numbers, think about what you can bring to the process that requires you to be there rather than the machine to run itself. In fact, when I did the session in the morning, I used NVIDIA as my example because I value NVIDIA, I own NVIDIA, so I had to do it for personal reasons. And I talked about the process by which I built the story. Now, obviously, I don't want to go too deep into that because it'll suck up the rest of the session. So you get a chance, look at the next few slides, and you will see my story before and after DeepSeek. So I'll skip those steps because clearly that will suck up the rest of the session if I go down. But every one of my valuations has a story. And if you see my blog, actually, every time I value a company, I put the story and the spreadsheet there. For two reasons. One is so you can see my story. And two, so that you can disagree with my story. I build my spreadsheets in a way where if you disagree with my story, I don't want you to bitch and moan about what you don't like about my story. It's my story, my value, my decision. You don't like it? Make it your story, your value, your decision. So I'll give you the architecture. And you say, look, I don't think NVIDIA will grow at 60% a year. Okay. Put in the number that you think it'll grow at. Come up with your own value. But it essentially makes valuation into a much more exercise in which you've got to be there. Third, and this is something that I feel deeply about, is when let's say wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you have a question. You're walking down the street and you look at a building, I wonder how tall that building is. Be honest with me. How do you get the answer? You pull up the phone, you do Google search, even before ChatGPT. So how tall, and it's amazing how it has the answer to every single question, right? And I understand if it's the height of a building, that's perfectly okay. But let's say you're valuing a company and say, what tax rate should I be using to value this company? It's LATAM. Should I be using the Latin American average tax rate, the global tax rate, the local country tax rate? There is an answer on Google search that you can find. But if you do this, you've just lost a chance. Chance to do what? If you try to reason your way to an answer, it forces you to exercise that muscle. And what is terrifying is how that muscle gets used less and less now. I have 4 kids and soon to be 3 grandkids. I have 2 grandkids, and I worry about whether they will ever need to use their reasoning muscle because it'll be so easy to look up answers to questions, right? With ChatGPT, you don't even have to type in Google search. Just ask how tall is that building, ChatGPT. It knows your location. That's a scary thought. It knows exactly which building you're looking at, even scarier thought. It knows how your mind works, most scary thought of all, and it gives you an answer. Reasoning is a muscle, and the less you use it, the more flabby it gets. And evolution is nasty in terms of what it does to things you don't use, right? The dodo bird lost the ability to fly because it never flew. What if 50 years from now we can't reason our way to an answer? What's my name? Let me look up Google search, what's my name, right? I mean, it is entirely possible that if we don't use this muscle, we will lose it. And I wrote a piece for a teaching magazine about the Google search curse, because by having the answers so easy and accessible, we're not reasoning our way through. When I teach my classes, when people ask me a question, I never give them the answer. I reason my way to an answer in front of them. Why? Because I want them to see the process by which I got the answer, because remember the old saying about teaching, giving somebody a fish and teaching them how to fish? My job in valuation is not give them answers to valuation questions they have, because those questions will change over time. It's for them to understand the process, even if they don't like the process and disagree with it, of this is how I came up with the answer. It'll make you uncomfortable as a teacher, because sometimes the process is mushy and you say, I'd made this leap of faith here, but you make that. So if the next time you have a question in whatever discipline you're in, before you look up the answer, think about, hey, with what I know about this discipline, how would I reason my way to an answer? So reason it out. And the more you work at it, the stronger that muscle becomes. Right? Finally, you know what they say about an idle mind, right? Devil's workshop, is that what it is? I don't think so. I think an idle mind is where human beings make those strange connections. Connections between unrelated thoughts. Let me present to you Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree. Apple falls on his head. apple fell on your head. What would you do? You'd probably eat the apple, right? Or curse the apple. What did he do? Came with the laws of gravity. Archimedes sitting in a bathtub. Notice the bathtub is overflowing. I'd call the plumber right away. But what did he do? He jumped out of the bathtub without putting clothes on, ran right through the town, yelling, "Eureka, Eureka!" Discovered that you displace water based on your volume, not on your weight. You see, where's this going? When your mind has nothing to do, it connects things that are often, most of the time it's useless wandering, but sometimes you connect things, aha. I'll give you an example. Towards February or March of last year, I get an email. I wake up in the morning, I was in San Diego then, so I check my email, and there's an email from a guy in Iceland who made it a practice of reading my blog. Don't ask me why. And he says, I'm a valuation appraiser in Iceland. I read your blog all the time, and I'm valuing a business called the Blue Lagoon. Heard of the Blue Lagoon? It's a legendary Icelandic spa. It's been around decades, very profitable, earns a high EBIT, high operating income. He said, I'm valuing the Blue Lagoon, but I'm running into a problem. You know what his problem was? A volcano had erupted about 100 miles away, and the lava was flowing in the general direction of the Blue Lagoon. He said, I've been reading all your books looking for a lava effect, and I don't see it. What should I do? Because clearly it is a threat to my value, right? Because it wasn't something insurance companies would cover. Your entire spa would disappear. He says, I didn't know the answer to the question right there. It was too early in the morning, but my dog was scratching at the door. And go for a walk. And in San Diego, you go for a walk, everybody's smoking pot, and you come back high, the dog comes back high. It's always a threat you run, so I take the dog for a walk. And while I'm walking, I'm thinking about how would you bring in the effect of a lava flow that might hit this spine. And while I'm thinking about the Blue Lagoon, I think about this company called 23andMe. It's a company that collects saliva and does DNA testing. A catastrophic event happened about a couple of years ago where a hacker got into their computer, got the data, a catastrophic event. While I'm thinking about 23andMe, I start thinking about fossil fuel companies. Why? Because my mind just jumps around. You're saying, what do you have to what COP are we on with a bunch of clowns gathered together in Baku and then in Dubai and next year in Rio, wherever they get together? And what do they say every time they get together? The end of the world is coming, climate change is... Okay, let's say that's true, the ocean. Then how do you explain the fact that ExxonMobil is trading at a higher multiple of EBITDA now than it was 20 years ago? So I said, how do fossil... If climate change is the real threat that it is out there, and I think it is, why aren't we seeing it in fossil fuel companies' prices? Or in Manhattan building prices? Because the oceans are going to rise 3 feet, those buildings are all going to be underwater. And while I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about my own house in San Diego, which is 2 blocks from the ocean, and one of the biggest earthquake faults on the world. And so what was I thinking? A tsunami or an earthquake, there goes, I won't tell you how much I paid for the house, it'll go into the ground. And as I'm thinking of all of this, I start thinking about the Mad Max movies. You ever seen the Mad Max movies? You remember in any of those movies, anybody checking their portfolio? Never happens, right? Why? Because in the event of a catastrophe, what is your number one objective? Survival. You don't say, oh, my Manhattan building that I bought for $1 billion dropped by 800 million. I got back home and I wrote a post on catastrophes from the early last year that you can read, where essentially I said, as human beings, here's what we do with catastrophes. We set them to the side. We don't bring them into our... It sounds completely irrational, but it is actually completely rational, because in the event of a catastrophe, none of this crap matters anyway. So why bring it into the probabilities and assess the value of a company based on it? I am convinced that we don't price in catastrophic risk into most companies, and we don't do it because we're human beings. So when you think about catastrophic risk, it's you can But this all came together because I took a walk for 40 minutes without my smartphone. If I'd taken my phone with me, none of this would have happened, right? I'd have been busying my mind with all this stuff I had to look at, like what Facebook posts and Instagram posts and Twitter, and where more and more, 30 years ago, you went to a bank, you stood in line. What did you have to do? Nothing. Your mind was blank. You had no choice. Today, you go to the airport, you wait for a flight. Every person around you is checking their phone. If I were conspiracy minded, I would be telling you that technology companies are setting you up to be displaced because they're removing the chance you have as human beings to actually do that kind of random thinking that leads to these moments. We say, that connection moment. Give your mind chance to kind of wander. It's not easy, but it's actually getting more difficult, rather, because all I'm saying is this is the essence of humanity, right? Where you kind of think about things, you talk to strangers. All those things are getting rarer because technology has come in and kind of filled in those spaces. The best weapon we have against bots and AI is rediscovering that humanity. It might be less difficult for you, but if you have kids, this is going to be more difficult for them. They're going to live in a world where this is what they know, right? This is they will have no free time because every moment of every day will be filled with stuff. So prep for your threat, whatever that threat is. And I'll give you 3 strategies you can adopt to deal with that. It's coming for every one of us. The question is what form it will take. And so as you look at it, the first is white-collar jobs are going to be more a threat than blue-collar jobs from AI. Remember 30 years ago when factory workers started losing their jobs? And people were going around giving advice like, learn to code. It's coming back for that. If your job is coding, you know what I'm going to do? Learn to plumb. Coding is the most replicable. You don't need a coder. In fact, a machine will almost always be a more efficient and better coder than any coder can be. What goes around comes around. And many of those white-collar jobs that benefited from, the globalization will now find the blowback from AI. Hard skills are going to be more easily replicated than soft skills. For the longest time, we encourage kids, go get an engineering degree, go get a math degree, go get a finance degree. This history major, literature major, it's not going to get you a job. Hey, maybe it's time to rethink that. When my youngest son was choosing between colleges, he had 2 good choices. He got into Yale and he got into Wharton. He never comes to me for advice, but in this one, for whatever reason, he came to me, partly because I think he wanted to blame me for whatever the choice was if it didn't go right. Yeah. Now, my youngest son also wrote poetry in high school. He's a very good poet. And I encouraged him, and you could probably guess by now which one I encouraged him to take. Both are good schools, but Wharton is a business school. It's an undergraduate business school. You're going to get a very good undergraduate business degree. Yale doesn't have a business school. You're going to have to take English classes, etc. So guess what I encouraged him to do? I said, go to Yale. He's an English econ major. Strange mix, right? He took poetry classes in the morning and Robert Schiller in the afternoon. And I think he's better for that mix because that's what I think the future will go to, is people who are multidimensional, who have both the left brain and the right brain working. But if you're thinking about protecting yourself, and you're saying, look, AI is not going to come for me. I'm going to leave you with a famous wager that Pascal, the French mathematician, made about whether God existed. See, he thought like a mathematician. He said, either God exists or he doesn't, or she doesn't, depending on which. And either you believe that God exists or doesn't. So if you believe that God exists and God actually exists, heaven. If you believe that God exists and he doesn't exist, then of course you spent your life following the 10 Commandments, kind of not eating 40 days of Lent, but it's a small enough sacrifice, If you don't believe that God exists and God does exist, hell is waiting for you. So he actually put weights on this and he said, look, I don't know whether God exists, but if you weigh out the costs and consequences, it's better to believe that God exists than he doesn't, because the net pluses you get are much greater. So let's do this with AI. Either AI is actually going to be a threat or it's not going to be a threat. And you can either believe it's going to be a threat. So if you believe AI is going to work and it actually works, at least you'll be prepared for it. If you spend the next 5-7 years developing those skills and AI doesn't show up, you'll actually be better at whatever job you've done because you've built those other skill sets. So even if you don't believe there's this whole, you don't think the AI thing, you think the whole thing is overblown, that it's not going to come, act like it's going to be a threat, because it's better to be prepared than not prepared. And being prepared here will make you better at whatever job you're doing, a banker, an engineer, a mathematician, a teacher, because it makes you think about those skills that you're not using that you should be using. So I've run out of my time, so I will turn it over to the Q&A. So.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was phenomenal. I have to confess that I couldn't attend the talk this morning.
That's good.
And I was expecting a little bit
It's on YouTube.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Not the morning talk, but talks like it. Maybe
Okay.
the morning talk will be on YouTube as well. Andres, you
Later today, I'm sure.
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah.
I have to say I was expecting a more technical financial thing. And I don't say that in the sense of that I'm disappointed, but I mean the opposite. I thought it was a talk combining the financial discussion with a lot of human wisdom, right? So I really like that. I feel like you are a fox more than anything else, right?
I'd like to think so. I'm a dabbler. That's how I describe myself. I know very little about lots of different things, but that's fine.
That's good. And I want to make a precision on one of the things you said. I loved your story about San Diego. And you said that you came up with this great aha. Because you
I have to tell you, not every walk ends up in a post and major insight. Some walks I come back just high, no idea what I was thinking about.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
So remember, there is lots of idle mind when nothing comes out of it, and you got to be okay with it. You got numb, so it's part of it. Yeah.
I was going to say that you said it was the fact that you were not carrying your phone that made a difference.
Yeah.
I was going to say that maybe it was the pot, but
the what?
The marijuana.
Oh, that could be too, yeah. But I think the thought connection there might be a little random, and I wouldn't quite trust the connections that come out of a cannabis-driven high. So, but it could. But I think the key was not having something that could have occupied my attention.
Well, that was great. Thanks so much for being here. I think we have 15 minutes, more or less. So those of you who have questions, be ready. I'm going to open it up in a minute. I have couple of questions.
Okay.
The first one being the dean of a business school. You mentioned this thing about specialization. I think that today business schools and universities more generally tend to reward specialization more than general thinking. What do you think about that? Is that something that...
But I'm curious, I'm going to push back on this. So I agree with you, but tell me in what form.
In the sense that to be a successful professor in good university all over the world, if you're writing papers...
First, tenure is the big thing. Is there a similar process, right? Yeah. How do you get tenure in Chile? What do you have to do?
You publish a lot of good papers.
Publish papers in a discipline. What do you have to do? You have to pick narrow topics with close solutions, right?
Yeah.
You've learned very early, and this is one sign that a discipline is aging. I take finance. Finance was a very young discipline in the 1960s. So you had people like Gene Fama and Merton Miller asking big questions. Are markets efficient? Should companies borrow money? Pick up a journal of finance now. You look at the topics and say, who's interested in the answer to this? Because the question is so narrow and so focused that there's a subset, an echo chamber you're writing to. So the way we reward specialization is by the way we grant tenure, which is built around research, and research requires specialization. I thank the stars. I am at the age I am because if I was starting, my guess is I'd be too general to actually be able to publish. I'm incapable of spending 3 years of my life answering a question that nobody cares about, and then spending another 2 years of my life getting it published so that 23 people in the world can read it, right? It seems like an insane waste of my life. I haven't submitted a paper to a journal in 25 years, and I can almost promise you that I will never submit a paper to a journal for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
Why? Because I write to be read. I don't care. So you are right. We reward specialization because of the way our reward and punishment system is built around rewarding specialists for their depth of knowledge in a discipline rather than for general skills.
Okay.
Long answer to your question.
No,
correct,
but that was.
So as a dean, you're going to change the tenure rules now?
No, but I think this is not a discussion for this audience because these are mostly alumnus. But I think that the university system it's
broken.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but you said it.
Yeah.
And the problem is that there is a network, right? Because if we do this in our business school, professors would start working in a way that might fit.
And you know what?
With us, but not with the next employer, right?
If you go to my blog, I describe myself as being at the intersection of 3 businesses that all deserve to be disrupted and broken. The financial services business, incredibly inertia-bound business. The publishing business. Every time I talk to my publishers, I have to rip my hair out because these guys live in the 20th century. I mean, one of my publishers, John Wiley, is refusing to publish my book in an Indian edition. The way books work is, the US edition costs $100. You can't charge $100 in India. People can't afford it. So usually publishers publish a cheaper and cheaper paper, $25. They're refusing to do it. And I've had 16 conversations with John Wiley. So why? And they say, it's causing cannibalization. You see how the mind works, right? People can get on the Indian Amazon, order the Indian edition. So I said, how many books were cannibalized? Because they said, we don't know, but it is causing cannibalization. I said, let me get this straight. You're turning down the largest English-speaking market in the world right now. And let's face it, it is the largest English-speaking market in the world. Because you're afraid that your books could be cannibalized, but you don't know how many can be cannibalized? And he said, now that you put it that way, yeah. And I said, that makes no sense to me. So, and the third is education. Education is broken as a business, right? Universities have forgotten their end game, which is to educate. They become too caught up. I mean, I tell undergraduates, if you think about the hierarchy of where you fall in a university's priority list, you're not number 1, you're not number 2. You'd be lucky to make the top 10, right? You got tenured faculty, they run the university, and this is like letting the lunatics run an asylum, right? Tenured faculty are incapable of making long-term decisions. Why? For personal reasons, right? You're 61 years old, you're not going to mess with the tenure system now. Say, that's for somebody after me. I know there's a problem, but all I have to do is last 7 more years, 8 more years, and I'm out of the system. You have tenured faculty, then you go down the list. Somewhere in the top 10, maybe towards the very bottom, we've lost. And I think that it deserves breaking. I know what the Chile is as expensive as the US, but in the US, in education, I told you my son went to Yale. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a 4-year education. For what? For a product you can't return, even if you don't like it, right? So, long answer, I think education is broken. It needs to be fixed. In my blog, I said, my mission in life is to disrupt my own employer.
Okay. Don't get that idea, guys. You're the professors in the first row.
Every class I teach at NYU is recorded and put on YouTube, and I invite people to take my class online for free every semester. I do it publicly. I go on my blog and say, I'm going to be starting my class at NYU. You can take the entire class. I will put the lectures on. I'll give you the lecture note material. I'll even give you the quizzes if you want to take them yourself. I can't give you a degree or a certification, but you'll get everything you get in the class. And every time people ask me, aren't the university pissed off about it? I don't care. I really don't care. What's the worst they can do? Fire me? Okay. I'll go back to San Diego. Nice place to be. I'll walk my dog a little bit more. Maybe I'll get more blog posts. Okay? So I've made it my mission to try to undercut the business I'm in because I just don't think it does what it's supposed to do. And no.
Okay. I had
so you
other
even want
questions,
that?
but I think I need to change my script now. But there's something about business, about what you're saying, which is this drive to disrupt, break down, change how things work to start all over again. Which you were mentioned during lunch, that you think that is, if I got you correctly, that you think that is something that the U.S. economy or the U.S. as a system more broadly
the U.S. has
been able to allow that or even foster that attitude that in other regions we lack. Can you share that?
I think there is always this tension between preserving the status quo and starting anew, right? We have connections, the companies being around, the products we grew up with, the things that we've always done. There's always that force of inertia saying, I want to preserve that. And I understand that. But there's a time when it's time to let go. It's not working anymore. And I think you need to allow rule breakers to come in and change the system when that happens. And you're not going to like these rule breakers. They're not going to be pleasant people. Let's start with that as a given, right? Because to be a disruptor, you got to get in people's faces and tell them what? You guys are screwing up. You're doing a terrible job. What polite person does that, right? But you need those rule breakers, these disruptors, because without them, so much as I, disagree with some of the things that Musk is doing with Doge, let's face, I see the world in shades of gray. Is the U.S. budget system broken? Absolutely. It's broken because it's got legacy things built into it that are built up. It's not that it was intentionally broken, but there have been legacy problems that have built up over decades that so the way it's worked is new government comes in, we're going to fix things, they fix things on the outside. Obamacare. Healthcare in the U.S. is broken. Everybody who's ever gone to the U.S. knows that U.S. healthcare is broken. Obamacare initially said, we're going to fix it, but no, they didn't. They kept the legacy system. They worked around the edges, and 15 years later, Obamacare is not working anymore because the legacy problems are gone. Sometimes you need to break systems to build them back up because then you don't have the legacy problems. So I think that any time you get too attached to the status quo, and my most recent book is called The Corporate Life Cycle. It's about there's a point in time where it's time for you to leave the arena. You're a company, you've had your great days. GE outlived its welcome by about 10 years. GE should have probably been liquidated in 2008 because it had a great run, 118 years, amazing company. They lasted about 10 years too long. So by the time you got to the end, it was a horror story, right? Another head being lopped off, another division being sold off. There's a time for every company where it is, you essentially say, this has been a good run. It's like, I draw the parallels to human life cycles, right? Who wants to die? Nobody does. So what do? We put these life extenders on. You've lost the capacity to think on your own, but I make you live another 11 years. Congratulations, right? If you think Latin America is a problem, Europe has an even bigger problem. It's full of zombie companies that are well past their due date, that continue because the system won't let go. And if the system won't let go, it's tough for new players to come on. Name me the last great tech company that came out of Europe, and don't say Spotify. I can't think of one. You're saying, why? Aren't there bright Europeans? Of course there are. There's something in the system that prevents these companies. So what do? They go to the US, start a company there, grow it there. You need a system that allows things that don't work anymore to just go away. The more you feel attached to them, the more difficult it becomes for newcomers to enter.
Okay, it's time for this interviewer to go away and open it up for the audience. Very shy group of people. Okay, I'll ask another one. I mean, come on, guys.
They're thinking about how to disrupt the university,
Yeah, I know,
right?
I know.
On the outside, so.
You mentioned your granddaughter.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of taking 1 year off and spend the whole year with her. And that made me think about all the changes that are taking place, I mean, out there. War, AI, the Liberation Day, I mean, are you, and you just talked about the benefits of change and uncertainty in a way, which changes uncertainty. Are you mostly optimistic about the future? Pessimistic? What's your sense?
I take the karmic view, which is
What?
things like karmic view, which is there are things I control and the things that I don't. If I live day to day wondering what Trump is going to do the next day, I will go crazy. So you know what?
Ask
I
him.
take care of my little part of the world, and I will go on Monday and teach my classes, and I will be asked about the tariffs, and I'll give them my best answer. But I refuse to let my life be driven by things I don't control, because that's a pathway to insanity, right? So the great thing about looking after a baby is, guess what? The baby's diapers have to be changed whether Trump has tariffs or no tariffs. Maybe the diapers will cost a little bit more. So I think one of the advantages of having a day-to-day life that takes up much of your time is it keeps you grounded. It's when we start becoming, when your entire life is worrying about what's happening in the outside world and you can't control it. All it can give you is make you upset and give you an ulcer, and what effect? The tariff's still going to be there after your ulcer shows up. So I know it's tough to do, but I actually prefer, I have what I call the sleep test, which my investment portfolio is to be such that I don't lie awake at night wondering what happened that day. And tonight I will go to sleep soundly. I'll sleep like a baby. I'm going to be exhausted. I don't know what my portfolio did today, and you know what? I'm not even going to check. I know it was a bad day. It's probably gone down a lot. What is checking it going to do for me anyway, right? It's not going to reverse the damage. So, it is part of, I live in the world I'm in. The world I'm in is going to be one with change and chaos. Will it be good change? For the moment, I think near term, it's going to be more bad than good. I mean, I can't see anything coming near term that say that's a good thing. There's a potential now for a trade war that could play out in multiple ways that have negative effects. But if it happens, I will bring it into my analysis. It'll be part of my classes. But for the moment, it's not even on my top 10 list. I have a list of things I have to get done. It's not even there. Right?
This was not one of the questions I had prepared, but when I hear you speak, I have to confess that I see, in my head, there's kind of how do I say this in English? It's not that easy for me.
Say it in Spanish anyway.
No, okay, no. It's not that easy for me at first to reconcile.
Yeah.
On the one hand, the world-leading expert on financial valuations with the savvy, human, humble, accessible guy I have sitting right next to me. So at the beginning, that is kind of, this disonante. How do you say that in English?
Disconcerting.
Yeah, but then I thought about what you said about numbers and stories, and then I thought maybe this guy is so good at valuations precisely because he's able to kind of take in everything that is going on out there, not just the numbers, the financial statements, but.
I'm going to make a confession, and this is probably true of every discipline. Valuation is incredibly simple. If you can add, multiply, subtract, and divide, you can value companies. You know why we add all these layers of complexity in valuation? To keep outsiders out. Every discipline does that, right? You go to a
It's
doctor,
like a tariff.
and the doctor...
It's like a tariff?
It's like a tariff. It's
Yeah, okay.
more than it. It's so you go to a doctor, and they say there's something wrong for you. They give a Latin name to it. You know why they give it a Latin name? Because, oh my God, that is incredibly... Then you go home and you look up the Latin name. It says you have a boil. 400 years ago, you'd have gone, they'd have lanced the boil. Now, of course, the doctor gives you this long Latin name. You have to get an MRI. There's a whole layer of things. Every discipline creates layers of complexity to keep outsiders out. My view of valuation is, my job is to is to remove the complexities and show everybody that they can value companies. They don't need an appraiser. You don't need a degree in finance. My entire class, I start every valuation class with a pre-class test of what I'm going to teach in the next 80 minutes. You think that's weird? How will they know the answers? I actually frame it in general terms and make them pick. And 95% of the time, they pick the answer we come up with after I've gone through 80 minutes of assessment. The message I want to leave with people is, you can reason this out. You don't need me or this class to get there. All I'm doing is giving you a structure to essentially take what you'd have reasoned your way to get to that answer. So it's, luckily I'm in a discipline that's so shallow. To become an expert, all you need is a little bit more than nothing. So it's not a whole lot of depth there. This is not rocket science, right? This is not some deep discipline. It's just over time, we've accumulated these layers of complexity. And almost every question in valuation is a pragmatic question of estimation. It's not one of theory. It's not one of big questions we don't know the answers to. It's really a pragmatic question of, how do I deal with this specific issue in this specific company? Lava flowing towards a spot, right? That's a practical question. There's no big theory needed. You need to figure out, how do I bring it into value? So think about that. How would you bring it into value? Because I sent him an answer, and you can probably come up with a similar answer. I've kept him.
Guys, I think we have to let him go, unless there's one final burning question.
What's he saying?
He's a professor at the school.
Yeah.
And he was saying in Spanish that he would like you to repeat what you said about your teaching assignments and the load of teaching you have. But it's not necessary to say that again. You can leave it
I
there.
teach 3 classes, but there are 300 people in each class. So I teach 900 people.
Okay, let's keep that number. 900 students per year.
So I teach 3 big classes, but that's it. No.
Okay, guys, no more questions? Come on, I'm sure everybody has one.
Go ahead.
Julio.
So, how are you doing against or with the Damodaran bot?
Actually, it's turned out 5 company valuations so far. And if I were giving a grade, I would give it a B, B+. It gets some mechanical things. But you know what? 80% of my class, that's all they'll get is the mechanical things. What makes people good at valuation is imagination. Right? You got to make that leap that doesn't come just from the data, but getting a sense with the data, with what you know about the company. And to make that leap, you need imagination and be willing to be wrong, right? That's basically it. The AI bot right now can't do it, right? It'll do it, it'll take you because it does what it's taught to do. It's read everything, it says, this is where I will leave you. So it's B+. It's as good as it's better than an average banking valuation, let me put it that way, right? So,
and cheaper.
And it's far cheaper, right? So it will get better though over time. One of the things that separates machine learning from AI. You remember when IBM came up with this computer program that played chess? This was like 30 years ago. And it started against the grandmasters, and after a while the grandmasters refused to play it because it started beating every single grandmaster. And you could see why, right? You fed it every single chess game that had ever been played in history. you could never surprise it. It had seen every move before and it remembered every counter move. AI is not machine learning because it actually is sentient. What it is trained to do is make decisions with incomplete information. So we can feed, it's like a human being in that sense, right? You can feed it, it doesn't need that final piece, it'll make that leap. Right now, that leap is not as good as a good human being can, but it will get better. And that's why I said act like it will get better over time. And keep working on your skill set, because that bot out there might not be as good as you yet, but it's learning. It's lurking in the background. It's like a dystopian movie, right? If you remember 2001 and HAL, AI is moving towards HAL rather than a traditional computer. Right? And that's a scary thought. That's what terrifies people about AI is what if it starts to get sentient enough that it starts to overrule human beings, saying, that's not the decision I'd have made, I'm going to make it for you. Right? So it is already pretty powerful. Right now, it does require more resources because it needs a powerful computer, be able to go with the data. But it'll get more efficient over time as well. So the only pathway is to move. Okay.
Now they're coming up with the questions. I think he has to leave at 5.
No, I don't have to leave at 5. Car doesn't come till, I don't know, 5:30.
Okay. Yeah. We'll take more questions.
I don't think our cars come yet. My session's at 7. I'm talking to CFAs at 7. So
okay, we're fine. We can take a couple more questions.
Okay, thank you very much for those additional minutes. So in relation to that, a couple of points. One of my biggest fears.
What do you do?
I work at valuation. I'm a valuation manager at PwC.
You do a lot of fair value accounting, right?
Yes.
A lot of goodwill impairment, lot of rule-based stuff.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, the ones that you have criticized a lot.
No, I haven't criticized. It's that I am not sure that you really need a human being when you have that many rules. And this is why, when fair value accounting started, I told the people writing the rules, it's saying valuation is about principles, accounting is about rules. If you bring accounting mindset to valuation, you will kill it because you will write too many rules. So I'm sorry I interrupted. So you work for PwC, you work in valuation, you do a lot of accounting valuation, which I call show valuation because nobody really is affected by them. I hate to say this, but no, you can revalue assets, you can impair goodwill, but the market basically doesn't care.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. And one of my biggest fears when the AI is coming in my
space,
work field,
and it's coming. It is coming.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's like a Gabriela bot.
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
In my neck. Is that this like machine is going to be able to work and to apply and to be specialized in the tax area, in the accounting area, in the finance area. So when you said that we should be prepared to be specialized on a generalized area,
because
an advice
on a specialized area, you don't have an advantage anymore, right? A computer can basically learn everything about goodwill impairment.
But is it expected for me to know everything, like tax, account, finance, like?
No, generalists basically know very little about everything, but you know enough about everything that you can look at a tax accounting judgment and say, that doesn't make sense given what I know about corporate finance.
Right.
I see valuations all the time where people have done this, and I look and say, you know what, you follow all the rules, you come up with a number, it doesn't make any sense to me because from the perspective of running a business, doing that should not lower your value, but you told me it lowered value because I understand the big picture of value, which is really a general perspective. So what I would work on is that general perspective. You can look at a number and immediately say, that doesn't make sense, right? It follows all the rules. That is where the generalized perspective kicks in.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Yes, no, that's what I wanted to hear, like an
And
advice.
I would start to wander away from accounting valuation if I were you. Long term, this is not a great place to be, right?
No, that's not the best thing to say when my boss is leaving.
I know. Both of you should wander away at the same time because he's not protected either, right? If AI gets good enough, you're all being replaced by AI engines, right? Only thing that'll be at the top is Ernst & Young or Deloitte or KPMG. The company will stay, but there'll be a bunch of bots underneath. Nobody's protected from this. You can be as high up as you want in the organization. It's unfortunate. Legal and accounting valuation is so incredibly rule-based. That's why I've never done expert witness work in my life. Thank God for that. I have never done accounting valuation because, frankly, I value companies to act on them. Accounting valuation, that's not the end game, right? It's to redo balance sheets, presumably to give information to investors, but even that's been lost in the shuffle because nobody looks at balance sheets anymore. They look at income statements and statements of cash flows. So it is far too mechanical from my perspective for people to be able to get an advantage with imagination. So think about other places your skills can play because you do have skills. There are other places where imagination can help you more with those skills.
And if I can push back a little bit,
yeah.
I guess also that in the process of those, crafts being disrupted by AI, some companies will have to start using AI to gradually replace what people do today. And there's an opportunity also for those companies, right?
Companies
Instead
that
of
sell
a third party disrupting their business for themselves.
So who makes money off that? The people who sell the AI products and services will make money, right? There's going to be a business for that.
Yeah.
It's not going to be any of the existing companies, right? There's going to be some tech company that provides AI products and services that McKinsey will use and KPMG will use. There will be people who make money on AI products and services. But for 90% of companies, AI will be a cost, right?
Okay.
It'll be a cost. It won't make them more profitable. It'll be a cost. I was saying in my class, and people get tired of hearing, if everybody has it, nobody has it. So an active investor say, AI will save us? How? Everybody has AI. You have AI. It'll be like preparing for the SAT. 40 years ago, when my wife went for the SAT, she actually walked in and took the SAT. Today, you take 3 years of classes before the SAT. It doesn't improve your standing anymore because everybody takes those classes. 10 years from now, every company will be spending on AI, which is good for the AI product and service providers, but for the rest of us, just another cost that gets passed through.
Okay, I think we really need to let you go. I have to confess that I didn't follow the script I had, but I think it went very well.
Well,
I
that's
really learned a
because I was
lot.
talking about disrupting education, and I think I'm a little uncomfortable. So that's
kind
okay.
of put me off balance a little bit. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Join me giving him a great round of applause.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Damodaran, for your presentation. Thank you very much, Dean and Boss, for this conversation. Yeah, we will change our rules, our professor rules, so thank you very much for this insight. Well, thank you for the audience, for being here, for being part of this 20th anniversary of Master in Management, Master in Financial Management, sorry. And now we have the picture for the audience. Okay. Okay.